All right, let's get going. Cool. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Welcome to Roasting Origins Brazil. So a couple months ago, Ally and Cropster came together. We had an idea. And the idea was, what if we took one coffee, the same coffee, from one origin, and we sent it to roasters from all across the world. And we asked them to roast the coffee, to give us their thoughts about the coffee, to cup it. And what if we can get them all together in a webinar and ask them a bunch of questions? Well, we did it. So today's going to be really exciting. And the goal of today is twofold. So the first thing we want to accomplish today is have some fun. We think this will be a very entertaining webinar. We think it'll be very educational. We have highly skilled roasters from all over the world. They're coming today from Saudi Arabia, from Australia, from Brazil, from Germany, and from the United States. So that will be fantastic. And the other goal of today is to highlight Brazil as a coffee producing country. Now, we all know that they produce the most coffee in the world. I think they produce about 40% of the world's coffee. But when it comes to the conversation of specialty coffee or high-grade specialty coffee, they often get left out of the kind of the top spots as far as origins go. And so one of the things we wanted to do is partner with a farm and get a coffee, thanks to Ally, that could really showcase Brazil's ability to produce high quality specialty coffee. So before we go any further, my name is Taylor Wallace. I work for Cropster. I'm an account manager. I've been here for about 5 years. And from Ally, we have Ricardo joining us here. If you want to say hi.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is a pretty awesome project that we were able to put together with our friends at Cropster. And we're excited to be here comparing notes, listening about this coffee. I'm a Chief Operating Officer here for Ally Coffee, and I've been with the company since the beginning in 2013. And we have our hands a little bit all over the place, but Brazil is near and dear to our hearts due to our roots. And we're excited to be listening and talking more about this amazing coffee that you guys had the privilege to roast. And looking forward to learning from you what you think, about this coffee and Brazilian coffees in general. So I'm excited about this webinar today. Thanks, Taylor, for helping and hosting it. It's been a pleasure to be working with you guys on this project. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Awesome. So now that we've introduced ourselves, Ricardo, do you mind keep going there, and maybe we can introduce the coffee and talk a little bit about the farm and that relationship that you guys have with them?
Absolutely. So the reason when I started talking to Livia and Taylor and the folks at Cropster about this opportunity, the idea was to change the mindset, or at least to be exposed to some different coffees coming out of Brazil. Now, this coffee in particular, this farm in particular, is a farm that is very dear and near to me as well, because it comes from the same region where I was born and raised. So it's literally the neck of my woods, I guess, so to speak. And it is a region that gets a little bit overlooked sometimes because it's in the São Paulo state. And Minas Gerais is the biggest producer of coffee in Brazil as a state, and has several regions very well known. Cerrado being one of them, Sul de Minas being another one. But this coffee is kind of tucked in there in between those regions, in the São Paulo side of São Paulo state, and is in the Alta Mogiana region, near Franca. The city where this property is at is Cristais Paulista. And the producers, the Minamihara family, it is a third generation producing family. They are Japanese descendants, and so they have been settled in that area since 1973 and started producing coffee in a different way, a little bit more meticulous way than was produced there. I believe the farm has a little over 100 hectares and about 95 hectares of coffee growing in that area. It is an organic farm, so they produce coffee organically. And also they have some really cool things there. So they have a plot, for example, of coffee that is actually under the shade of avocado trees. They're also a producer of avocados, organic avocados in Brazil, and they have a plot of coffee that is grown under the avocado trees. I've been to this farm probably 5-6 times in my lifetime. I always love going in there just to have a beer or have some barbecue with the family, the Minamihara family, Anderson, Dona Clara, and Sergio Tulio, and their siblings. Amazing people to talk to, very passionate about the work that they are doing, passionate about growing coffee. And then the cool thing that they have in there, they have a little experimental field where they have over 40 different varieties of varietals, cultivars of coffee growing there as well, to do some testing and to do some experiments. And they also have 100% of their coffee is produced naturally, and they do partially the coffee dried on patios and partially dried on raised beds. But you see a thing on this picture, on the slide, you see Mr. Getulio on the black shirt, and then his son, Anderson. Anderson is the 3rd generation producer there. And so I highly encourage, when the pandemic's behind us, if you guys are going to Brazil, it is one of the places you guys need to visit down there. I'm sure that Hugo Rocco can speak as well to the farm there. I think he knows them very well and have visited the farm multiple times. And a few other of you, I've seen some other people from Brazil there. Carol is in the call as well. Her family buys their coffee in Curitiba as well. So there are some amazing people in this webinar, and this farm is near and dear to my heart. And I hope that you enjoy talking a little bit about more of the coffee itself, the lot itself that we chose. It is a Red Batan and is a natural process. And I think was dried in raised beds. So that's a little bit of the background information about the farm, the farmer, and their family. And I hope you enjoy learning more about the specific detail on roasting that coffee, cupping notes, and so forth, from this amazing group of roasters that actually had the opportunity to roast this coffee and showcase it to the best of their abilities. So that's my take on the farmer.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ricardo. Appreciate it. Cool. All right. So now that we've met them, so to speak, let's jump into meeting the roasters. So first off, we have Pat Connolly. So Pat is in the chat here. He can unmute and say hi if you'd like. Pat, I'll just read a little blurb I have written here about him. He spent nearly 2 decades in his coffee career now. He's worked in nearly every role imaginable, with 10 of those years now being dedicated to roasting, quality control, and green buying. He's coached the 2nd and 4th place finishing world championship competitors in 2017 and 18, and finished 2nd place himself in the 2019 Australian Roasting Championships. So, Pat, we're very glad to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for the selfie you provided us there. Cool.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here.
Yes. Sorry, I skipped in there. You can say hi, Pat. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sweet. We'll jump on to Mohammad here. Here we go. So in 2014, he and his partners opened up a company called Green Seeds Coffee, spearheading the introduction of specialty coffee into Saudi Arabia. And they would eventually go on to open a roasting business called Artist Hub, where he's still at today. From 2012 to 17, Mohammad attended roasting classes all over the globe and built his skills in this time. And then in 2017, he left his career in medicine to work in coffee full-time. And now their business acts as a resource for roasting, importing, equipment sales, and maintenance, and more. So hello, Mohammad. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the event.
So glad to have you around. Cool. So next we have Hugo. And Hugo has co-founded, oops, not Shelby yet. We'll get on to her. Oh, dang, I'm going ahead. There we go. Hugo, there we go. Co-founded Moka Clube, and the business began when he decided not to move away from medicine, but from engineering in his case. So quickly translating to a more data and tech-driven approach in the craft of coffee, which is why he uses Cropster, of course. And Hugo has now visited more than 200 farms and is always on the search for the best lots of coffee available. And he says, while hunting coffees is his passion, roasting them keeps him excited to continue learning and working towards highlighting the balance in every coffee that he roasts. Hello, Hugo. Thank you for joining and being our resident Brazilian in the chat. Very much appreciate you here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank
you. Hey, everyone.
Next, we have Shelby. Shelby works at Huckleberry, and she spent all 6 of her years of her coffee career in front of the roasting machine. She's someone who has become active recently in coffee education. You can find her on YouTube talking about a number of different topics and with Cropster. And most notably, she is, of course, the reigning 2019 U.S. roasting champion. So we are honored to have her around. Thank you so much, Shelby.
Thanks for having me. Hello, everybody.
Thank you. And of course, last but certainly not least, we have Garreth. He is a head roaster at the Barn in Berlin, Germany. Garreth is an Australian transplant into Berlin with now 10 years in coffee, with experiences as a barista, a trainer, and now a roaster. And his experience has brought him to enjoying the clarity in coffee, whether the flavors are familiar or unexpected and unusual. So, hey, Garreth, thank you. Thanks, man. We're very, very excited to have you all here. This is a very unique opportunity. Before we got started just now, Garreth was just noting on how unique of an opportunity this is, and I'm very glad we get to do this. So we're about to jump into the roasts and such. Before we do that, we'll just get into the format really briefly here. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to talk to each one of the roasters, talk about what they do when they approach a new coffee, what they did with this coffee, the way they would serve this coffee, if that varies or is influenced heavily by their market, and how this Brazilian has compared to their experiences with other Brazilians before. And once they go through their chat, we would love for you guys to ask questions in the chat. Please ask questions. I think this is a really fun time, something that you would not get the opportunity to do in this exact way. So please use it to your advantage, ask questions, and then we'll ask them to the roaster and get some fun answers. So what we'll do then is we will back up and we'll start here with, Pat. So I'm going to jump into my Cropster account. You guys can see my screen here. We're going to jump over, and I've already pulled up Pat's roast for this coffee. I know he actually had 2 roasts for this coffee, so I can pull both of those up. But anyways, Pat, yeah, you mind talking to us a little bit about this coffee?
Okay, if you could probably start with the previous curve would probably be more helpful.
Yes, absolutely. Let's do it. Absolutely. We can actually throw, if you want to, we can do a little bit of this. We can do the roast compare, and we can look at both of those if you'd like, so we can point those both out.
Okay, so starting with, I suppose, the first curve, the red one, these are roasted on 2 different machines. So when we generally receive a coffee, what we'll do is we'll roast generally 100 grams on a little 500 gram Mill City roaster. Cup the coffee, evaluate it. We have pretty much a standard curve we apply to, I suppose, countries and processes. And in this case, it was applying that same sort of 100 gram general Brazilian curve, I guess you could say. Just to cup the coffee and to also sort of see how it behaved slightly throughout parts of the roast, which then gives me a bit of an idea on how I will approach it when I convert it to a different roaster. So, look, I think for me, if you could probably just bring up the environment temperatures on those curves. So if you can see with the red curve, everything was sort of pretty standard from a cupping and roasting point of view on this coffee. I found towards the end of the roast, the coffee wanted to kick up a little bit. So I guess when applying that approach through to my production roast, which was 3 kilos into a 5 kilo customized roaster, I didn't want the end of that sort of ROR to kick up a bit. So you can see the environment temp on the blue curve. I've tried to tone that down a bit just to let the coffee develop more without sort of adding any kind of ROR flick and giving me any kind of bitterness, or alternatively trying to avoid it crashing too, because I guess with sort of these lower moisture coffees, you've got to be a bit careful in how you approach the end of that roast. You can tend to destroy some of the delicate notes in the coffee quite easily if you're not careful, I suppose.
And I can actually open up that second one in particular, and just zoom in on that. We have some stats over here on the right side about just duration, when first crack happened, development time and such. We have that over here. And then we also have your cupping notes if you want to jump into that.
Yeah, so pretty standard from a development perspective. I was sort of, after cupping this coffee, I wanted to roast it sort of to the degree of a single origin espresso. I think is well suited, especially for the Australian market. This coffee had some really nice, sweet kind of stone fruit notes that I wanted to keep in the coffee. And I think we use a lot of Brazilian coffee in Australia to blend for milk-based espresso coffees. But this coffee was a little more fruity, a little more complex than sort of your, I guess you could say, standard or lower grade Brazil. So I wouldn't want to blend that with anything. I wouldn't want to kind of mute those fruit notes that were in the coffee.
And we can pull up your analysis here too and look at that. So let's see, cashew, roasted hazelnut, stone fruit, like you're mentioning, vanilla, walnut, white grape. Yeah. Also, if you see evaluators on these saying Taylor Wallace, don't worry, that I didn't evaluate his coffee. But yeah, cool. So having this be a little bit higher grade Brazilian compared to other ones, is that something that you've experienced often, or did this shape your perception at all about Brazilian coffees or what you might look for in the future? Or
I think in the last, you could say maybe 3 to 5 years, you've started to see a lot more Brazilian producers experiment with their processing and their drying, and really bringing more of a fruity kind of higher complexity to their cups. Sort of pushing the boundaries, experimenting a lot more, and it's being a little more meticulous, I think, than what maybe producers have in the past, and being exposed, I think, to more techniques as far as fermenting and drying goes. And you're starting to see some really amazing coffees come out of Brazil. We've bought quite a few recently, which, you know, from a cupping perspective, you wouldn't necessarily think they're Brazilian, a traditional Brazilian coffee, that is, anyway. So this is another example of those. The flavor on this coffee I absolutely loved. So hence I wouldn't want to mute it with anything else, and sort of keep it to a light espresso roast and pull sort of a higher yield shot and keep that kind of nice acid and fruit in the coffee, I guess. But yeah, I was very impressed with this coffee. It's nice.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the explanation there. Perfect. By the way, as we're going through this, I'll be toggling back on Fahrenheit and Celsius. I know that we have that difference between the US and other people, so we'll keep toggling that back on and off. Cool. All right. Coming up next, we have Mohammad here. Mohammad, I'm going to pull up your roast curve for this roast, and if you don't mind, you can chat about it a little bit as well. Here we go. R5. Here we are right here. Yep. There we go.
If you can get the three profiles, 77, 78, and 80, just to give a comparison for those three.
In this case, I think this is the one that we had pulled up, the one that had the cupping notes on it.
All right,
Apologies.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, the challenge was that the sample size that we usually receive is either like 100 grams, 200 grams, and not more, or otherwise it will be like a big lot that we can play around with. But for this case, usually what we do for profiling is try to get different timings, like a slow, fast roast, and another roast in the middle. So this was the fast roast among the three, and this is the one that we liked with cupping. It's roasted on a Gießen sample roaster. It's about 200 grams. And if anyone used the sample roasting with profiling, they know how challenging it is just to develop a profile out of a sample roaster. It's very difficult to control the temperature and the heat. But that's what we do, and we have the full control of the airflow, the RPM, and other things. What I discovered with this coffee is that I needed a shorter Maillard reaction because of the low moisture. The moisture that I received was about 8%. So I tried to lower the time of the Maillard reaction as possible and to give enough time for the development later on. The flicking during the first crack was very tricky also. It was really hard to get around that. And if you can pull out the exhaust temperature. Yeah, thank you. So that's the way I do the control of the temperature in the sample roaster. I use the environmental or exhaust temperature to precisely control the bean temperature. That's the best way to do it in this machine. Otherwise, there's another curve that I used it manually, like increasing and decreasing the gas and the flame. But it will just crash after the first crack.
Yeah. So looking up here, just looking at your cupping analysis, I'll pull that up as well. As we're pulling that up, I'll ask you the same question. How is this compared to other Brazilians that you've had? And how would you think about serving this coffee? Would you include it? Would this be a single origin you would present, or in a blend, or how would you go about doing that?
Well, as Pat said, that the past 2 years, everything was changing in Brazil, providing like really extremely very good coffees in a different way. They're not only about the quantity anymore, they are looking also for the quality. And even though I tried some nice Brazilian coffee in the past year, but this was very impressive for me. I was really impressed with the wide spectrum of flavors and notes. And that's the reason I would not add it to a blend, that it has enough flavors that you want to experience and enjoy. There's no need to put another origin with this kind of coffee, except if I will do that just to enhance maybe the body or the aftertaste, which is not necessarily. The notes that we had like stone fruits, to be more specific, peach, and there are also when it's hot, it was caramel. It reminded me of the Kenyan coffee overall when it was warm. And then when it cools down, you get all these nice other flavors. And the most shocking for me was the floral notes. I did not expect that. If we give this coffee to the community here, I think they will change their mind about the Brazilian coffee.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. That is a
Thank you.
fantastic review. Appreciate it. Thank you. Cool. Jumping on, also remember you can ask any questions in the chat. We'll be happy to pull those up. Cool. Coming up next, we have Hugo, our resident Brazilian, in the room. All right, so we'll pull up your roast here, and yeah, go ahead and tell us about how you approached this coffee.
Yeah, cool. Actually was very excited to talk about it because all you guys are saying that you have a low density coffee, but for me, that only roast Brazilian coffee, this is it's a high density coffee. So we have a different approach or different mind when we roast this kind of coffee here. So I know the producer for the last 4 years, maybe. In the last 3 years, I've been roasting his coffee. So I have a big roaster we call Attila, 15 kilos. So I just have one chance with 6 kilos. So as I knew this coffee before, I did just the way I was used to do to roast this coffee. So my aim to I'd say release this floral or this delicate notes was to have this development. Oh, Ricardo, can you help me with the final part of the roast? So I see you guys all roast like 19% at the end. So I just roast after crack 10%. But I don't know. I don't know what you guys was expecting to have in this coffee. If you have like more body or more sweetness, and for us, because we consider a high density coffee here in Brazil, I don't know if everybody knows that we cannot import different coffees from abroad. So we just roast Brazilian coffee. So this is a kind of coffee that Brazilian doesn't know. So you can show this floral notes. You can show this clarity that I find. And this was my goal. I was thinking about it, and I tried to do with this roast. I have to be honest. If you see my notes in the Cropster cup, if you go up a little bit, yeah, it was 88. Yeah, was very high. I think I wasn't in the I was in a very good mood when I had this cupping, and then I tried the next day. I'm sorry, Anderson. I tried the next day. It was a bit baked. It's nice because we can see the roast. So the point was 87 in the next day. But can you go back to the profile? Yeah. So one thing that I saw in you guys, actually past two, was you guys have a different approach at the end. So you don't have this how do you say when you go down that quickly?
Maybe someone can chime in.
Explain, yeah. I don't know how to explain that.
Like
I hope
the crash at the end.
Yeah,
the crash.
Yeah, this crash. So this crash, I'm not used to do, but with this coffee was for me, it was very dense. So at the end, we have too much energy. I think inside the coffee, so I have to just turn down my roast to continue because it was 6 kilos in a 15 kilos roaster. So I think this is also the most different that I see in you guys are doing. But I'll just keeping my question to the end because I have some question for you. But
Awesome.
yeah, that's it. That's it.
I think if I could chime in a little bit here, Hugo, it is pretty interesting that in Brazilian coffees in general are known as soft coffees, right? So it's a little softer bean, and you have to treat the Brazilian coffee as such. And when you're roasting coffee, you have to take that into account, right? Actually, this farm, because of its terroir, I believe that, and the type of soil they have there, it produces a denser coffee for Brazilian coffee. So when Hugo is saying that for him is a dense coffee, it is because most of the coffees that he's used to roast in Brazil, they are actually softer than actually the specific Brazilian coffee from Minamihara farm. So which is very interesting. And it is, I think Mohammad mentioned a little bit that it reminds a little bit of a Kenyan coffee. And that's one of the main trademarks of the farm there, that their coffees has this Kenya-like characteristic for a lot of their lots, and which has helped them win several competitions in Brazil because it's very different. But talking about the density, yes, that is a denser coffee than most Brazilian coffees you actually experience. And for Hugo, especially, that is used to roast only Brazilian coffees, he can be more sensitive to the fact that if he gets a different bean from Brazil, he will notice it even more than most roasters elsewhere that is exposed to coffees from other origins where the coffee is definitely denser. So it's pretty cool that just to have a perspective and the approach of a Brazilian roaster in here as well. And so you guys can see, you know, their point of view and understand what they have to work with as well in Brazil. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Ricardo. I think for me, you can highlight three things in this coffee and this kind of roast. First of all, I think my roaster, so it's very conductive. So I not play with airflow. I have to control only with the gas. The second is because it's very different for us, for Brazilians. I try to keep this roast more lighter. So this is what I talk about the development time.
Did you maybe Hugo froze on us there? Lost him for a second. We'll see if he comes back. All right, well, don't mean to interrupt him, but maybe we'll just move on for now and we can keep those comments for the end bit when we can all chat together. All right, so coming up next then, we have Shelby. All right, I'll pull up your roast here, Shelby. And here we go. Shelby, there you are. All right.
All right, so this particular profile was done in a Gießen 15 kilo, so I was, severely underweight on that one, so it was so fast. But originally I had taken the coffee and I had put it in my sample roaster. I did 3 separate roasts of 3 varying degrees of development. It's typically what I do when we get a new coffee in that I'm not really sure of. I agree with Ricardo that this is definitely a higher density Brazil, but overall a pretty soft coffee. It was pretty easy to manipulate in the roaster. And what I found is that when you, what? Ricardo?
Oh,
No, I didn't say anything.
I think some other.
I'm sorry, it was the other Brazilian. It was the other Brazilian.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I think you're good.
My bad. Am I good?
Yeah, you're good. Yeah.
Okay. So what I found with the sample roast that I had done is that the lightest one definitely had those like really underdeveloped nutty characteristics. So I wanted, and almost had like an herbaceousness. So I really wanted to avoid underdeveloping this coffee, but I also found that my longer, a little more developed roast had this chalky quality to it. And so I figured out this isn't necessarily going to be an espresso style roast. I was going to roast it a little more like a single origin. So there's only about 1.5 minutes of development on it. It's at about 16%, and I think it's under 9 minutes. So it's a pretty fast roast. And I had to turn the gas on a little more at the end to get it to kind of push so it didn't totally stall out on me. But I was really pleasantly surprised with the fruit notes that were coming out of this coffee overall. I think that, Brazil, like the most fruit that you often get out of it is more of like a raisin quality to it, which is, still nice and sweet. But this one had a little more like clementine and cranberry and just had some really soft fruit tones that matched really well with the chocolate. As far as how I would use this coffee, it would really depend on like what the price was, right? Like if this was a decently priced coffee, it could be something that you could use both in a blend and a single origin and kind of be your saving grace of, we just buy a lot of this coffee and we use it for multiple purposes, roasting it in different ways. Because there is so much chocolate in this coffee that I think that it would make a really great espresso. And a good base for a blend overall if you developed it a little more. However, the fruit tones in it are bright and sweet enough that I think any single origin coffee drinker would be happy with this coffee. That being said, I definitely don't think it's as like wild or crazy as like a bright fruity Ethiopian. It is a really nice fruity, mellow Brazilian with good acidity. I'm gonna guess that I'm the outlier. Is that what you're?
No,
like
you actually. You actually are. I don't think you are. No, you're not on that one. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
What I
Yeah.
had mentioned to everybody before the roast is that they all 4 out of the 5 roasters had put the exact same overall score of 8.25. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a really stingy cupper, so but overall, like I did think that this was a fairly balanced coffee. It was sweet, it was approachable. It was nothing that I would necessarily like, give to my friends who love bright African coffees and be like, this is going to be your next favorite coffee. But I think it would be quite surprising that it was a Brazil.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much, Shelby.
Yeah.
All right. And Garreth is up next. I'll pull up your roast here and we can chat about it. Here we go.
Cool.
There we go. Boom. Here we are. All right.
Cool.
What'd you think,
So, generally, when I receive a new coffee to roast, I already have some idea of how this coffee is going to taste based on our evaluations when we decided to buy it. So, this coffee was a little bit different in that I only had one shot in our actual production roaster. So, the only production roaster we have is a UG22. So I did one roast in the Akawa, just to get an idea of what was I guess available in this coffee, like what it was going to taste like, and then roasted one roast in the UG22, so it was 4.95 kilos. So overall, I'm pretty happy with how the curve came out, considering I've never roasted a batch size that small in that size roaster. So in the beginning, I was pretty gentle with the heat. Being a low moisture coffee, it came in around 9% for me. I was surprised with the density being quite high, I thought, for a Brazilian coffee. But also the water activity was quite low as well. So I just wanted to be really gentle in the beginning. So you can see in my gas moves there, I've soaked for around about a minute, around about where it turns, and then just gently ramped up the gas because I really didn't know how high the ROR would peak, being such a low batch size in my machine. So I just wanted to play it really safe. And I think the beginning of the roast went pretty well. The other thing that I did tweak for this roast was just adjusting my drum RPM. So usually we roast 15 kilos and up to 22 kilo batches in that machine. And we have a drum RPM of around 46 to 50, 52. It kind of depends, but I just made an educated guess and wound it back to around, I think it was 39. Because being such a low batch size, we obviously need less turbulence in the drum. I didn't want to, increase too much turbulence, because then the conductive properties of the drum would be lost and it would become more of a convective environment. So the other thoughts I had going into the roast as well, with being a Brazilian coffee and after cupping the Akawa roast, was I noticed that it had really nice sweetness, like really nice fruit tones, and I wanted to highlight those. So my idea was to just extend the milliard phase just slightly than what I would on, say, a roast from Ethiopia or Kenya even, just to really highlight that sweetness. But overall, my approach wasn't too dissimilar to how I would roast a coffee from Brazil. So coming into crack, maybe a little bit hot, but that's why we see the crash just after crack. But although tailing off towards the end of the roast, it looks like it's flicked. I'm not too fussed about that. It hasn't flicked really hard, and in cupping, I didn't notice any roast defects. So overall, I was pretty happy with how the roast came out. So I think the roast, I dropped it at around 1:30. Can you just pull that back to the curve? Where are we? So 1:40, which is a little bit longer than I usually would for a Brazilian coffee like this. So around a 17.5% development. Usually what I'm looking at is more the development time and not the development percentage anyway. So the other thing that may be interesting for some people is the roast value, the color value. So it was around 60 on my light tails, and the ground was 78. So what I would be looking to use this coffee for would be not so much a blend. So at the barn, we don't actually blend any coffees. So we only work with single origin coffees. So we buy a lot of Brazilian coffee every year, and we run a single origin Brazilian espresso for that particular season. We have 3 or 4 of them coming for the coming season. So I would definitely see this as a candidate as like a really solid Brazilian single origin espresso. Had really nice fruit notes, very nice sweetness, and overall it was just a coffee that had really nice balance and really nice like flavor, and really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much for sharing. Appreciate it. All right. So that brings us to our next little section here. And I know, Hugo, you were wanting to ask the rest of the roasters questions. So also, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. If you guys have any questions at all for any of these roasters here, please feel free to do that. But yeah, so Hugo, how about we start off with you? What were you going to ask the rest of the crew here?
All right. I actually was excited to know. I think they all answer me, but excited to know how they will approach the coffee and what they talk about this coffee, because as I say, for us this is very different and a bit exotic here in Brazil, because we don't have Kenyas or Ethiopia. So I was just listen to some of you saying that this is a nice for blend or espresso. So this for us, we never use for espresso, because we don't have this other from other countries more acidity or bright acidity in Brazil. So this is one coffee that we can feel and we can show to our customers that is very different. But I think I already listened all the explanation about it. And that's it. I actually want to ask Pat that talk about this is good for espresso. So can you say again why is good for espresso? Well, so you talk about chocolate, but when I cup, I feel the floral and all the fruits. So are you comparing with other Brazilian, or you compare with other coffees?
I guess for the market in Australia, you have to understand that not a lot of coffee is drunk via filter methods. It's probably more than 95% of coffee is brewed via espresso. And of that, probably over 90% is based with milk. So for an Australian, I guess the consumers here, we the coffees we use for filter coffee, we tend to choose like very high acid coffees, very floral, very fruity coffees. So sort of Kenyans, Ethiopians, you know, high-end Panama coffees, things like that. So from a filter perspective, I guess our customers are looking for those sort of really bright, super fruity coffees. And this coffee has those fruit notes, but I think they're accentuated, but based on Brazilian coffee. If you were to look at sort of a flavor profile globally, you're probably not going to see in the higher sort of acid and fruit areas that you'd expect. So, and in saying that, I wouldn't want to mute those fruit notes by serving it in a blend or roasting it darker for milk. So hence sort of developing it a little shorter, a little lighter, and using it as espresso. But in using it for espresso, I'd still look for sort of a higher yield, a higher ratio in that shot to sort of bring out those fruit notes as well.
Yeah, cool. Understand. And then look into the notes, and you see I will not calibrate, and also that my note is the 88.5 because we just have this kind of, because of our market. And this, what is yours? Just to understand what was your.
So Pat, his would be PR2 here. So your Pat's
86.25.
is over here. Yeah.
Yeah, just to understand how the market changed the notes, the points of our cupping, as we're not calibrate with the rest of the coffee of all the world.
I think from a cupping perspective as well, that, I mean, I think you mentioned that your cupping score the next day was sort of down a point, which would sort of bring it down to sort of that 87.25. And then I think sort of between everyone, we have sort of a 2-point spread from top to bottom, which isn't really uncommon when cupping different roasts in different parts of the world, different water as well. So I think it's fair to say that everyone had a pretty similar opinion on the coffee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but I guess,
just to understand how it's difficult to calibrate, like between us, like.
Well, I think that your cupping notes are correct, that there are lots of florals in the coffee, but I think that what we're saying is that's not a deterrent for us using it in espresso. You know, like at Huck, we have 2 separate espressos that we run all the time. One is more of a comforting, more classic style espresso that, you know, whoever's just coming in to get a cup of coffee can have. It goes well with milk. And then we have another one that's our adventurous espresso that's going to be sweeter, fruity, a little brighter, and that we can sell people who are excited about drinking different coffees that they wouldn't necessarily come into contact with. So I think the florality of it is definitely not a deterrent to make it espresso for our particular markets.
I could not agree more, Shelby. I think that, Hugo, I think the cool thing about this whole event is actually looking into the specific markets that each one of the roasters are in. Like I think I said before, for you, you're more sensitive to those differences in the Brazilian coffees from region to region or from farm to farm, because you're only exposed to Brazilian coffee. So when something stands out in terms of Brazilian coffee for you there, it really stands out because there's a lot of coffee that is very similar. And then when some coffees, they have different nuances, those little nuances or those nuances there, they become accentuated because the majority of what you're exposed to is very similar. And when you find those specific coffees, for example, like this one, you definitely want to showcase that on the filter to your clients, because they're used to the big norm, right? Whatever else, the majority of the coffee that is out there. And this is something, and this coffee definitely is a standout. So you definitely want them to experience this coffee like you do. When you are in different markets like Australia or the US, or Europe, people have that opportunity to taste different coffees from different producing countries. And that is definitely, one day this person wants to drink a coffee that is a little brighter, and the other day they want to drink something that is a little sweeter. and the options are immense, right? They're huge. They're all these different coffees that they can access to. So I can definitely understand your side in your market. I'm a Brazilian as well. And then I can also understand the other participants' market as well, just because I've been in contact with those markets. But it is pretty cool to see, you know, I was explaining this to my team earlier today, that when in Brazil we find a coffee that stands out, it really stands out to us, because we're exposed to a lot of coffee that is very similar. So any standout coffee is really something else.
Exactly.
So one of the things in the chat, someone just mentioned, would the roasters presenting today be okay with contacting them? If you guys are cool with that, you can just drop your emails or anything like that in the chat, and people can pick those up if you'd like. One of the other things someone asked before was I also love how closely all the scores came in. They're pretty close. But also, if anybody wants to chime in here, if there was something that you would have done differently because you had a smaller amount of coffee, is there anything that you would have done differently? Could you go back and use more of it?
I mean, I would probably be tempted to be able to use a much higher batch for the machine that I was using, because all I had was like either the Mill City, where I could only roast like 400 to 500 grams at a time, and I didn't love the profiles that come off of that. I find that on my production roaster ends up yielding a little bit more sweetness, so I wanted to use that machine instead. But unfortunately, I'm at like less than a third of its capacity. So I'm really having to try to use as little gas as possible while I'm roasting that, and keep it from just flying at the end. So I think that would be my main thing, and maybe, I don't know, backing off of it a little bit, see if I could find some of more florals that other people were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Shelby. Anybody else? Any other questions in general, panelists?
Yeah, well, I'm probably roast shorter. I'm not sure if my one is the longest one. Is the green?
So you are the green one, yes.
The green one. I'll probably try with my friends now and do a shorter roast, just to see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was very different.
Yep.
Yeah, I finished it almost 12.
So low and slow, Hugo. That's great. You are roasting on your Attila, right?
Yes.
Yes. And yes, there will be someone just asked in the chat. Yeah, we will post this on YouTube tomorrow as well. So cool. All right. Well, unless we have any other questions to add in here, I think we can call it a day. We very much appreciate all the roasters who joined. Seriously, thank you so much. It's an incredible thing that we can take people from literally all over the planet and make this happen. We want to do another origin next. We don't have that planned out, but we want to also tackle another origin next and do the same thing. So stay tuned for that. But anyways, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Thank you for everybody in the chat. Thank you, Ally, so much. Ricardo, if you have any closing words to say.
Yes, I do. This is super cool to see, to have the idea, and work with you guys on this, to have this idea to gather this amazing professionals here around this topic, and just, it's been a dream, and then to see it happening, it's even more of a dream come true, and super excited to listen and learn from all of these people here. Also, I just saw that the producer is actually in the chat room. And I don't know, Anderson. I don't know if he wants to say a few words. Anderson Minamihara.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you for this show. I'm very, very appreciate, because we have work harder to do this coffee. And my family is very happy for this event with the Cropster and the Ally. Thank you everybody. Thank you for this knowledge about the different approach about this coffee. Thank you everybody. Thank you Cropster. Thank you Ally.
Thank you so much. Fantastic. Very much appreciated. Thank you for all your work.
Awesome, Anderson. Thank you so much. Also, I cannot forget, Taylor, to really mention that putting this event together has been a tremendous, tremendous task, and we could not have pulled it off without, the Allies team, marketing team, and Brazil team, and then also Cropster team, Livia, Daisy, you, and the whole Cropster team. So there's a lot of hands involved. Stephanie, Mike here on our side.
Yes.
My brother, actually, Caio in Brazil, that helped us define and cup this coffee and help us choose the lot that we're going to be using on this. So a lot of people involved there. So thank you everyone that helped us, put this together. We could not have done this without your help. And the Cropster design team, which came up with some really awesome promos and design work. So we're very fortunate to be partnering with such a professional company as Cropster. To have you guys as our software partner as well, we could not be more proud of this event. So thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so much. All right, guys, tune in next time. Till then, we'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.